What's happening, guys? Frank Reynolds here, and welcome in to another episode of Is It Worth It? Movie Madness. We are talking about the latest release in Hollywood, arguably the biggest release of the year. That is James Bond, the final outing by Daniel Craig in the title role, and it's No Time to Die. Man, is it something. We're gonna get right into it because there's a lot to unpack here. I'm not gonna hide my excitement after leaving the theater. It's everything you want in a spy thriller, plainly said. This is James Bond, and yet it feels nothing like a traditional 007 movie. That's not a bad thing at all. It breaks the mold from what has been constructed over the past, 25 films or something. It offers something new. It's an engaging, emotional experience. It's everything that we should see in Daniel Craig's final outing as the character that we've come to know and love him as over these last 15 years. It's a huge film. It's huge, but it's intimate at the same time. Like, the action sequences are gigantic. The sets are huge. The action is just jam-packed, and yet it weirdly feels rooted in reality. It's oddly satisfying compared to previous entries in this series. Again, it's something that we haven't really seen in any James Bond film before. It breaks the mold, and it gives us something completely and utterly refreshing. And while this is a film rooted in reality, the stakes have never been higher from a totally different perspective. I say that even with a James Bond film where, yeah, the stakes seem to always be just world-changing, but there's something here about this movie where every scene takes a twist in a way that maybe you don't see coming, or even if you do see it coming, it still hits in a way that raises the bar and keeps things moving forward in a way that just leaves the viewer guessing. We're not really guessing in a James Bond movie ever. We kind of know the formula at this point. But this time around, things are different. And it's just for the betterment of the franchise and definitely for this movie. Something else this film does a great job of doing. It establishes new characters in this universe for the studio to pursue some spin-offs should they decide to go that route. I mean, based on the new characters that are introduced here, particularly some of the women, the studio has its options to make another 007 film without necessarily needing a James Bond in the, title prominent role. And the studio has done it in a way that leaves their options wide open. It's an awesome way to go about doing it. They handled it perfectly, and a lot of that has to do with the pacing. I mean, the pacing in the movie is brilliant too. Some people are going to complain about the runtime. It's a long movie. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes without credits, something like that. But for me, some of the slower parts in the end of that second act, beginning of the third act, are what make the film what it is. They also allow some of these characters I just mentioned, these new characters, to really grow and develop, and it allows you to feel a sense of empathy for them. We're meant to enjoy the ride here. It's not a sprint as it has been in other movies, maybe not necessarily in the Daniel Craig era, aside from Quantum of Solace, but it has been a thing in the past with some of the other Bond characters, and it's just not here. We are meant to really immerse ourselves in this story and go along for the ride with James Bond one more time with Daniel Craig. And speaking of Daniel Craig, I say this with so much confidence. Not only is he the best Bond, that might ruffle some feathers, but it's true. He's the best Bond, and this is the best performance by an actor playing James Bond to date. He nails it. He crushes this role. It was awesome. It was awesome to see Daniel Craig one more time as James Bond, and to do it in his best performance to date. The entire cast kills it here, really. Well, mostly. Let's get to the things that the movie actually could have improved upon. There's not much, but there are a few, and some of that is related to the writing of, I wouldn't say our secondary characters, but the secondary characters. Some of the dialogue with the minor characters here is forced. It does detract from the experience. Obviously, the humor and the interactions and the acting, as I mentioned, are at an all-time high here for our primary and our secondary characters. In fact, I would say that the humor is the most natural, organic, and almost like throwback to the Bond films of old out of any of the movies in a great way for our main cast. But the secondary characters, the writing, it's almost like they gave these guys and gals some lines to help the audience understand what's going on when we don't really need it. It's forced. It's things people wouldn't actually say in real life. This is maybe necessary if the direction is not as good as it is here, but because the direction is so good, it then feels off to kind of explain what's happening when we're being shown that very thing at the same time, or we can infer it based on other interactions from other characters. It's a minor thing, and it doesn't happen often, but it did stand out to me in the movie, so it's worth pointing out. The thing that's a little bit more major here that's going to turn some people off is the impact of the villain. Don't get me wrong, I actually think this is a really good Bond villain for reasons that are unorthodox in some ways. But given that this is supposed to be a finale of sorts, at least for, Daniel Craig's version of the character, you would have thought that they would almost like save the best villain for last. That's not the case here. Granted, the motivation of our antagonist does drive the story in a way that blends perfectly with the emotional impact presented. So for that, it makes up for all of the shortcomings related to our villain in the big picture. I guess what I'm trying to say is just that this movie won't be remembered for its villain. The villain is going to be more or less an afterthought in No Time to Die. Again, not a bad thing because of how good other elements of the story are, but this could have been one of the best action movies of all time had the villain been just a little bit stronger. This might matter more for diehard fans who really crave a strong villain in the movie, or in the Bond movies. It didn't matter for me as much, especially given, again, how strong the other aspects of the story are. Overall, is this movie worth it? Even if you don't necessarily love Bond movies, yes, this movie is totally unlike any other spy thriller you're going to have seen, especially a new spy thriller in recent years. If you want to watch a good action movie that packs a punch in more ways than one, get to the theater and see this thing, because it is going to tug at your heartstrings as much as keep you on the edge of your seat. And that is really all you can ask for when it comes to a good action movie. There's dazzling effects, there are smart storytelling devices present. It's one of the best Bond movies ever written and ever produced and shown on screen. It's gonna lead me to a quick ranking of the 5 films in this Daniel Craig saga, I guess, to kind of give you guys a better understanding of where No Time to Die lies on the scale. And I will, of course, put a worthy meter score with all of them. I recently rewatched all 5 of the movies, so these are fresh in my mind. We're going to start with the worst of the Daniel Craig movies, and that, I think, is almost a universal agreement here. It's Quantum of Solace. I gave Quantum on the worthy meter scale a 65 out of 100, and it's just not as strong as the other movies. It is unique in the sense that it tries to deviate from the formula similar to No Time to Die, but in a way that doesn't work as well. It tries to actually serve as a traditional sequel to the first movie of the Daniel Craig era, Casino Royale, and it doesn't do it in a way that does the first film justice. Antagonist is really weak. The story itself is just way too quick. It's the shortest Bond movie of this era. It's better than a lot of the Bond movies made in the 20 years leading up to it, but coming off the heels of Casino Royale, it is a disappointment. From there, I'd almost say like we do a big jump to number 4, because the gap between the quality of films between Quantum and the other 4 Daniel Craig films is staggering. That Fourth film would be Spectre, the most recent release before No Time to Die, coming in at a 74 out of 100. I get why some people don't like Spectre. I was not one of them. I actually really enjoyed Spectre. The third act has its flaws though. It tries too hard to wrap everything up almost. Maybe they weren't sure if Daniel Craig was going to be coming back for another round. So this does serve as a finale in more ways than one. And they try to do so too quickly just in that last act, while the first two acts are a little bit long. Just the pacing ends up being a little bit of an issue, and the way that we're able to bring everything together is a bit perplexing, but overall, it's a really solid James Bond movie, but it just comes on the heels of our number 3 film, and again, similar to Quantum of Solace, it just doesn't quite live up to that hype. Number 3, with a staggering 85 out of 100, that's Skyfall, and man, this is just an awesome movie. In the grand scheme of things, regarding this 5-film saga, it almost feels like the one that's most out of place, given that it doesn't have a huge connection to a lot of our other films. But the movie itself is just a classic Bond film with a great villain. It does have some emotional aspects, some unbelievable action sequences. It's a great Bond movie, and it takes us in a direction that we don't see coming. I think I'm saying that a lot with these Daniel Craig movies, and it just goes to show that MGM is learning as they create these Bond films how to make them unique. Number 2, also at an 85 out of 100, but I gave it the edge just from a sheer enjoyment factor, is No Time to Die. It's an unbelievable conclusion to the Daniel Craig saga. It's the most emotional Bond film you're going to see. It has incredibly high stakes with a ton of awesome action sequences here and some great character development. You gotta go see this in theaters. But it's not quite as good as the best Bond film to date out of any Bond film. Arguably my favorite action movie ever made. That is Casino Royale, the first film in this series, coming in with a whopping 90 out of 100 on the worthy meter. It didn't get any better than Daniel Craig's first outing here, and while some of the films in his story certainly did their best to get up to that level again, it was almost an impossible task given the quality of Casino Royale. There's twists you don't see coming. The intrigue is at an all-time high. The chess match, or I guess in that case the poker match, that happens between our antagonist and our protagonist is second to none. It's an incredible experience. Overall, these Bond movies are just some of the best action films out there, and I would highly recommend you watching them if you get the chance. Thanks so much for joining me on today's Movie Madness review. We will be back here next week. We do have a Dune review coming up of the novel, but we also are going to be talking about Halloween Kills next weekend, the big scary movie release of October this year. So certainly look forward to talking about that movie and whether or not it's going to be worth your time. That one, of course, is streaming on Peacock as well as being released in theaters, so you can watch it from your living room. Thanks again, guys. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you later.